March 5, 2020 marked the controversial end for Nathaniel Woods. Convicted of the 2004 murder of 3 Birmingham police officers, Woods spent 15 years on death row in Alabama. His execution sparked outrage and calls for justice, with many believing that Woods was wrongfully convicted. But what led to his conviction? Was he truly guilty of the crime he was accused of? And what were his final moments before the execution? What was his last meal and final words? This is his story. Welcome to Criminal Profiles.
An Alabama man has been executed despite pleas to save his life. Nathaniel Woods was present when 3 police officers were killed in Birmingham in 2004. But it was another man who pulled the trigger. That man, Kerry Spencer, is also on death row, but he's yet to be executed for the crime. Outside Woods' prison before the execution, his sister held up a page from his trial transcript. She says it shows he was surrendering when the shots rang out.
For Nate Woods in Alabama, the Supreme Court lifted it, and now the governor, who has already said that she is not going to change her mind, is the only one that could stop the execution. All right. Well, let me say this. Let's just be clear about what this is. This ain't a legal execution. This is a lynching. All right, so everybody in Atlanta treated like a lynching. Everybody in Alabama treated like a lynching. Everybody in South Carolina treated like a lynching. Everybody in Tennessee and New York and California treated like a lynching. Don't accept this as any kind of legal court issue punishment for a crime, because that ain't what this is. This is a lynching, all right? So, all right, you want to lynch? We take it at that. We understand. Brother, to be absent with the bodies, to be present with the Lord. We fought for you, and we...
On June 17, 2004, the streets of Birmingham, Alabama, witnessed one of the darkest incidents in its recent history. A quiet neighborhood became the center of national attention when a drug bust turned deadly, claiming the lives of 3 police officers. It was a raid that left the community shocked and confused. And at the heart of it all stood a man named Nathaniel Woods. Nathaniel, known to friends as Nate, was no stranger to trouble. Born and raised in Alabama, he had his share of run-ins with the law, mostly for minor offenses, but nothing in his past could compare to what he would be accused of that fateful day. According to police reports, Woods and his associate, Kerry Spencer, were operating a small-time drug house. When officers arrived to serve a warrant, chaos erupted. The prosecution would later argue that Woods lured the officers into the house. Knowing what would happen next, moments after they entered, Kerry Spencer opened fire with a semi-automatic rifle, killing 3 officers instantly and injuring a 4th. Spencer never denied being the shooter. In fact, he claimed full responsibility and insisted Woods had nothing to do with the murders. But Alabama law doesn't see it that way. Under the state's accomplice liability law, if you're involved in a felony that results in a murder, you can be charged with capital murder even if you didn't pull the trigger. That's exactly what happened to Nathaniel Woods. In the days following the incident, emotions ran high. The police force mourned the loss of their comrades. The public wanted justice, and Woods was swiftly arrested and charged. Despite Spencer's confession, Woods was tried as a cop killer. His trial was swift. Prosecutors painted him as the mastermind behind the ambush. His defense struggled to counter the narrative, especially without expert witnesses or effective legal representation. The jury found him guilty of capital murder, and he was sentenced to death. Nathaniel Woods, a man who never fired a shot, was now a convicted cop killer on death row, as he sat in a cell at Hallman Correctional Facility. Woods maintained his innocence. "I didn't kill those officers," he told anyone who would listen. But for the state of Alabama, the case was closed. Justice, they said, had been served. The events of June 17, 2004, would change the course of Nathaniel Woods' life forever. That day, 3 Birmingham police officers, Carlos Owen, Harley Chisholm III, and Charles Bennett, were gunned down while attempting to serve a misdemeanor warrant at a known drug house in the Ensley neighborhood. The house belonged to Nathaniel Woods, but it wasn't Woods who pulled the trigger. According to prosecutors, Nathaniel ran inside the house after officers tried to arrest him, shouting that they were about to be ambushed. Moments later, Carrie Spencer, a friend of Woods and also staying in the house, opened fire with an SKS assault rifle. Within seconds, bullets flew. When the shooting stopped, 3 officers were dead, and a 4th, Michael Collins, had barely escaped with his life. Woods was unarmed. He didn't fire a single shot. But prosecutors argued that he was just as responsible, claiming he lured the officers into a deadly trap and helped coordinate the ambush. Under Alabama law, accomplice liability can lead to the death penalty. Evan, if the accused didn't kill anyone themselves, Spencer, the actual shooter, admitted to the killings but repeatedly insisted that Woods had nothing to do with it. Nathaniel didn't shoot anybody, Spencer said. I did it all by myself. The defense claimed that Woods had tried to surrender but was met with aggression and panic. They said there was no credible evidence showing he planned the murders. Yet the jury didn't see it that way. With emotions high and public outrage overwhelming, Nathaniel Woods was convicted of capital murder in 2005 and sentenced to death. The case sparked intense debate. How could a man who didn't pull the trigger be sentenced to die? Supporters began raising questions. They pointed to flawed testimony, inconsistent police accounts, and the fact that Spencer, again, the shooter, had taken full responsibility. Still, the court stood by its decision. Appeals were filed. Clemency was requested, but nothing changed. The verdict. Nathaniel Woods remained on death row, caught in a system that many believed had failed him. As his execution date approached, his story spread beyond Alabama, igniting conversations across the country about justice, accountability, and the limits of the law. As Nathaniel Woods' execution date of March 5, 2020, drew near, a growing movement began to take shape. Civil rights activists, celebrities, and legal experts raised alarms about the fairness of his trial and the circumstances of his conviction. Social media exploded with the hashtag #SaveNate, and a chorus of voices demanded that the state of Alabama reconsider. One of the most vocal supporters was rapper and activist T.I., who publicly decried the execution as a miscarriage of justice. He wasn't alone. Kim Kardashian West, known for her work on criminal justice reform, tweeted her support for Woods and urged Governor Kay Ivey to halt the execution. Martin Luther King III, the son of Dr. King, also pleaded for clemency, stating that executing a man who didn't pull the trigger was not justice. Petitions gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures. Activists pointed to issues such as ineffective legal counsel, lack of expert witnesses, and questionable evidence. They argued that Woods had essentially been convicted for being present at the scene, not for participating in the crime. Even the shooter, Carrie Spencer, maintained his position. Nathaniel is 100% innocent. Despite the public outcry, Governor Ivey and the Alabama Supreme Court did not intervene. Woods' legal team filed emergency appeals, and on the day of his scheduled execution, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a temporary stay. For a few tense hours, there was hope. But that hope was short-lived. Later that same evening, the Supreme Court lifted the stay without explanation. Woods' final appeal had failed. The path was now clear for the state to carry out his sentence. The backlash was immediate. Protesters gathered outside Hallman Correctional Facility, and vigils were held in cities across the country. The case highlighted not just Woods' story, but a broader issue: the use of the death penalty in cases with questionable evidence and potential prosecutorial overreach. As the clock ticked toward midnight, the world watched closely. Nathaniel Woods' story had become more than just a legal case. had become a symbol of systemic injustice. And still, despite the national attention and widespread doubt about his guilt, Alabama moved forward with its plans. As Nathaniel Woods sat in his cell, awaiting the grim fate that loomed over him, the world outside continued its scrutiny of his case. The weeks leading up to his execution were filled with mounting tension and calls for justice from across the country. Woods had spent over 15 years on death row, but his case had not been forgotten. Despite his conviction, his supporters maintained that he was wrongly convicted. Advocacy groups and individuals, including celebrities like rapper T.I., who had previously spoken out on Woods' behalf, argued that he had been unfairly sentenced to death for a crime he didn't commit. They pointed to the fact that Kerry Spencer, the man who had admitted to shooting the officers, had taken full responsibility for the deaths. They believed that Woods was a victim of an overzealous legal system that had failed him, and his case became a symbol of the flaws within the justice system. In the final days of his life, Woods' legal team fought tirelessly to halt the execution. They petitioned the courts, asking for clemency, claiming that Woods had been denied a fair trial and that new evidence could exonerate him. But their efforts were met with rejection. March 5, 2020, was the day everything would come to a head. Nathaniel Woods was to be executed by lethal injection at the Hallman Correctional Facility. For Woods, the reality of his impending death was something he had come to terms with. But still, he held on to his innocence. On the morning of his execution, Woods spoke to the press for the last time, reaffirming that he had not killed the officers. "I did not kill those men," he said softly. "I am sorry for their families, but I am innocent." Despite the protests and the calls for justice, Woods' fate was sealed. At 9:01 p.m., the lethal injection began. He would be pronounced dead shortly after. The execution was carried out despite the outrage and controversy surrounding the case. As Nathaniel Woods was led to his death, the world continued to debate the case. Was he guilty, or was he the victim of an unforgiving system? Would he be remembered as a murderer, or a man who paid the ultimate price for a crime he didn't commit? The debate rages on, but for Woods, the journey ended that night. His name became part of the larger conversation about the death penalty, wrongful convictions, and the flaws of the justice system. As the clock ticked down to his execution, Nathaniel Woods was given one final moment to reflect on his life and his fate. On March 5, 2020, he was escorted to the death chamber at Hallman Correctional Facility, the weight of his 15-year sentence heavy on his shoulders. But before he would be strapped to the execution gurney, there was one final privilege that came. With his impending death, his last meal, Woods, like all those condemned to death, was given the choice to select his final meal. In a case like his, where the eyes of the nation were on him, his meal would be scrutinized. Though in truth, it was a fleeting, almost insignificant moment compared to the gravity of his situation. Woods requested a simple meal: fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and a soft drink. It was a humble request, perhaps a reflection of his desire for some comfort in his final moments. A small token of normalcy before the ultimate sacrifice, as he sat in his cell, waiting for his last meal to be prepared. Woods had plenty of time to reflect. Over the years, he had remained steadfast in his declaration of innocence. He had never wavered, always insisting that he had played no part in the murders of the 3 Birmingham police officers. The media coverage of his case had only intensified. In the weeks leading up to his execution, with celebrities, activists, and even members of the public urging the state of Alabama to reconsider his sentence. But despite the groundswell of support, the appeals, and the protests, Nathaniel Woods' fate remained unchanged. At 9:01 p.m., the injection began. His final words, however, would not be about his meal or the execution itself. Instead, Woods used his last moments to speak to the world about his innocence. As he was strapped to the gurney, he reportedly looked at the witnesses and said softly, "I did not kill those officers. I did not kill anyone. I am sorry for the families of the officers, but I am innocent." With that, his voice fell silent. The lethal injection was administered, and within minutes, Nathaniel Woods was dead. His execution raised more questions. Then it answered, leaving a cloud of uncertainty and grief over the families of the officers, the supporters of Woods, and the people of Alabama. His final words became a poignant reminder of the complicated nature of the justice system and the consequences of decisions made long before a person's death. In the aftermath of the execution, the debate over Woods' guilt and the morality of the death penalty grew even louder. While some saw his death as justice served, others saw it as a tragic miscarriage of justice. And as the years go by, Nathaniel Woods' case will continue to serve as a haunting reminder of the fragile nature of truth and the ultimate consequences of the system we trust to deliver it. Nathaniel Woods' execution sparked a national outcry that questioned the integrity of Alabama's justice system. While many believed Woods was wrongfully convicted, others felt that justice had not been served. His case became emblematic of flaws in the legal process, with critics arguing that Woods' trial had been rushed, his defense inadequate, and his conviction based on questionable evidence. Even after his death, the controversy surrounding his case continued to grow. Celebrities, activists, and ordinary citizens rallied to demand a re-examination of the death penalty, with Woods' case symbolizing the larger fight for criminal justice reform. His execution also highlighted systemic issues within Alabama's legal system, sparking conversations about race, fairness, and the power of legal representation. For some, Woods' execution brought no closure, leaving families and communities divided. His story remains a cautionary tale about the fragility of justice and the irreversible consequences of a flawed system. This story is part of the ongoing conversation about death row cases, prisoners' rights, and the ethical implications of the death penalty. If you want to hear more stories about death row inmates, executions, last meals, and final words, don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth coverage.